to Capitol tonight. So after the election, there was a lot of buzz about the new voting machines, and much of it was actually not positive. Voters expressed a myriad of complaints, citing a lack of privacy, malfunctions, and inaccuracies, which of course has led us to the recounts and court battles that have been ongoing since November 3rd. But my next guest thinks that the new machines are getting a bad rap, and he's reminding us now that those old lever machines were in fact far from perfect. Bo Lipari is the executive director for New Yorkers for Verified Voting, and he's joining us from our Ithaca bureau tonight. Bo, how are you?
Hi.
So you actually say that the new voting machines are in fact better than the old voting machines, which I'm kind of surprised about because I've heard a lot of sort of nostalgic laments from people who really missed those old clunkers.
Well, it was undoubtedly going to be a lot of nostalgia about changing systems, and the lever machines are systems that New Yorkers have voted on for almost 100 years. So we have no living memory of using paper ballots. But what the new systems provide us that the lever machines never did and the other modern alternatives never did are these paper ballots that we're talking about right now, where voters have actually recorded their vote without the intervention of any computer on paper, and we have a record of that vote. That was never the case before, and people did believe lever machines to be infallible. They got that big, nice mechanical clunk when you opened the door and all the levers went back. But in fact, lever machines had their share of problems and failed to record votes in many elections as well.
Okay,
we've seen disputed elections before in New York.
Of course.
When we look at the things that are happening in this new election, you can see that a lot of it is not about machines, but about the process of learning to use new machines correctly.
Let's back up for just 1 second, if you don't mind. The old machines, obviously, were replaced because of a federal requirement. I mean, I think a lot of people are losing sight of that. The 2000 election, which is now, ironically, being cited by a lot of people who are talking about hanging chads and the need to count every vote and New York's Florida, et cetera. That's what brought us to this point, isn't it?
That's exactly right. In 2002, Congress passed the Help America to Vote Act, called HAVA, and they mandated a replacement of what was deemed older voting technologies. The punch card type voting systems that were all the reason of the problems in parts of Florida were among them, but so were lever machines. So since 2002, it's been clear New York would have to replace the systems with something. The question was, what would we replace them with? And there were two options. The one option was a terrible one, and it was the favored one. It would have been paperless, electronic, touchscreen voting, purely electronic voting with no paper record. The other is the system we have today, paper ballots and optical scanners.
Okay, but here's the thing. Also, New York was the last state, the very last state to comply with HAVA, and was actually threatened by the Department of Justice with all sorts of legal action, the loss of funding, and sort of a whole laundry list of things. And people like you, if I remember correctly, argued that actually the delay might have turned out to be good because we didn't fall into the same traps that other states who had opted maybe for those touch screens that you're describing did fall into.
That's exactly right. It was a very difficult battle to get the powers that be to recognize paper ballots as a better system. And when HAVA first passed, a lot of states went over to this paperless voting. In New York, to some part because of our legislative dysfunction, but some of it because of a lot of citizen agitation, we took a longer time, and over the course of the 6 years it took to finalize the decision, it started to become apparent that the electronic paperless voting being used in other states was a really poor alternative and would have been a nightmare in a situation like we have today.
Do you not, though, see at least some problem? I mean, really, the complaints that I saw, most of which came in across our transom through email or people on our website complaining, was mostly about privacy, the lack of privacy. You have these privacy sleeves. You have what we've seen here on some video is people coming into these sort of little stations, right? There's no curtain, there's no closet that we saw before. Would you agree with the lack of privacy, that needs something to be addressed?
Yes. What we have to do here is separate problems with the machines from problems with the process. And that's where a lot of people are confusing. There have been a lot of procedural problems, privacy among them, because the systems are new and we're using very different methods that have to be used from the lever machines. Poll workers have been trained, sometimes not as well as they should be, but training becomes very important. Privacy is just that kind of issue. The systems don't afford the kind of isolation booth privacy like a lever machine does, where you're inside this booth. But if you position those little privacy booths correctly so they don't face out into crowds, if every voter gets a privacy sleeve, a folder where their ballot goes in whenever they walk out with it, if every poll worker would understand the requirement that they're not allowed to simply walk up to a voter holding a ballot at a scanner and take that ballot from them, that they can only go up at the request of a voter and only when the voter has covered their ballot. So these privacy issues are very real, but they're procedural problems that can be repaired, and we just haven't done enough training yet or aren't used to the systems enough. It's never going to feel like the isolation booth of a lever, that's for sure, but a lot can be done for folks to feel that their vote indeed is private. This year a lot of mistakes were made on that procedure. But again, that's a procedural problem, not a machine problem.
What is your feeling, though? A lot of other states have, just today we're finding out, actually finished last in terms of turnout of all across the nation in the midterms, despite all of this hype about waves of voters and the Tea Party anger and all of these things that we thought would generate turnout. New York comes out last. So other states, however, allow things like early voting, allow things like phone voting. What are your feelings about those kind of modern era efforts for voting? I mean, we had so much trouble here. Getting to the next step might even be worse.
Well, you've got to be careful when you start proposing new ways to vote and carefully weigh the pros and the cons. Just like when HAVA passed, a lot of folks looked at the pros of electronic paperless voting and they didn't look so hard at the cons. When we look at things like vote by mail, early voting, I'm not saying they're bad necessarily, but with every plus come minuses as well. I think there's things that could be done, making Election Day a holiday, trying to give workers some paid time off to be poll workers. There definitely needs to be improvement, and certainly I believe that hearing New York was last in turnout was very disappointing.
What about same-day voter registration? How do you feel about that?
I think absolutely we should have same-day voter registration. There seems to be no reason nowadays with the ID check that's required anyway when you first vote. That's been the case since HAVA passed. I think that's a great idea. We do need to expand the franchise as much as we can. And same-day voter registration would go a long way towards that. We
see today that the governor-elect, Andrew Cuomo, has weighed in with a letter. He sent it to the chief judge, Jonathan Littman, saying, please get this thing going, expedite the process, and don't let the recount, while it should be fair, drag on into the 2011 legislative session, which of course will be his first session. Clearly he's worried about, he uses the word crippling the legislature, stalling because of the balance of power in the Senate that's up for grabs. He says it's not a political request, but it seems like it probably has some political overtones. What's your take on that?
Well, it certainly sounds a bit political to me. I mean, ultimately, all these election disputes we are hearing about, there's currently 6, I think, ongoing in the state, 3 of them revolving around state Senate races that the governor-elect's referring to. These are pretty partisan battles when they come down to it. For me, as a citizen advocate, what I want is to make sure that we do get a recount if there really is some legitimate question. That's why I like paper ballots. We can do a recount. We should do that with expedited as much as possible, but you don't want to hastily count the ballots or not do it correctly just to meet some arbitrary deadline. The state, I think, could survive with an unclear majority for another couple of weeks if we had to into the governor-elect's administration.
But is there any, in your view, is there any moment when it's time to cut it off? If it lasts, say, I mean, there's been discussions that it could last for months. I mean, that is a significant thing. We've not seen state Senate races go too terribly late. Into February, we've seen some of them, but right. Months is a long time.
Well, February would be months, and we have seen this before. In 2004 in Westchester, the Stewart-Cousins Spano race went on for a long time. That was a lever machine race, but the disputes kept that seat open for a long time. You said as late as February. Well, that's 3 months from the election. I don't think we should try to put a price on democracy, the price of the recount, nor should we sacrifice accuracy for speed when there's no good reason. We've had these kind of situations before. There are more paper ballots to count now than there were before, but you know what? I think that's a good thing, because ultimately we're going to be able to get a true count of how voters voted. We are going to know who the winner really was. We shouldn't rush that process, because democracy is worth the time.
Well, Bo Lipari, you are a voice in the wilderness at this point. I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about the new machines. Maybe it's just because they're trying to get used to them. In the meantime, I want to thank you very much for joining us from Ithaca.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.